Hey, welcome everybody. You got Will here today. As always, we'll give everyone a few minutes to pile in. You can ask your question in the chat, in the Q&A section, or just use raise hand. I will be back in just one moment to kick everything off. So please go ahead and get your questions queued up if you have any. Be back in just one moment. All right. All right, and so we'll start with, we got Chris here. So Chris, you had his pre-submitted question, sir. And I will find that. Oh, stink, where is it at? So your question is about, by default, every report includes a find text in any column search option. When the total row count for the report grows very large, does this search option also consume a rather large amount of processing? And so we're talking here, I'm sure the versions are different, but in what version are you working on right now, Chris?
6.19.
Okay, then yeah, are you talking about the search at the top here with the magnifying glass that allows you to search the entire report? So yeah, that actually doesn't search. That is a in-memory search. So it can absolutely eat up a bunch of resources for larger reports.
All right. And in the same vein, I've learned that it is popular to use the filters that are on by default on each column. And that strikes me as another area where, yeah, those little filters.
Yep.
That strikes me as another potential way to chew up processing time when, you know, I have a report that now has tens of thousands of records, and for some reason users like to do filtering by this style in there.
It's the same thing. Yeah, this would be in memory as well. The only way to apply the best practice here for larger reports would be to build runtime editable filters for your users to use. If you expect there to be common queries, as those actually append or modify the dynamically generated fetch to have the report engine fetch the scope set of data on your behalf. Otherwise, you're just doing in-memory filtering using some of these other options. Now you can disable all of these things and constrain the manner in which users can search in the report viewer. If you want to remove some of these options, you can remove this search as well as this search and only allow users to have the runtime editable filters if you're seeing performance issues with the reports that we're talking about here.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of performance problems. Is sort of the it's sort of like we've realized we're the frog in boiling water is what it is. And consistently there are these reports that are showing up at the top of the profile report of what's going on with the system. And so I kind of have a hunch And so I'm trying to, so my hunch is that I managed to get users to confess to me that they love to use that hourglass thing up there. And I think, but how can that work except that it now has to scan all, 40,000 records, or maybe just 30,000 records in memory
Exactly.
in order for it to do its thing. And in the same vein, they like to do these filters on the columns, which again strike me as the only way that I could imagine it working is that I'm
Right.
consuming in memory time across all 30,000 records. And I can't believe that their scope is that large. So, that's been my prejudice, but I'm also a guy who likes to measure my prejudice so that I don't just, try this and, kind of be reckless about it and not necessarily get where I'm going or anything like that. And this from the point of view of, but my difficulty is I don't have good ways of measuring except to, well, try this and maybe something happens. And I thought it would be worthwhile to ask the question, is my prejudice well-founded?
Sure. Yeah, I think what would I recommend? I think we should, if you're having performance issues, we should open up a support ticket and like have someone help you like look through some of the reporting and stuff and give you some things to think about or focus on. We're happy to do that.
Well, I do have a short list of things that I've been negotiating with the larger world around me. For example, one of the most popular uses of the spyglass is to essentially look up by number. And I said, well, wouldn't you rather have, like this little interactive form where you can give it a number and have a broader reach in terms of where that number is found, but then go straight to that thing without and not have to be in this other, the convenience is it turns out that the only spot where they can search everything is in this rather expensive report, but that's the only reason they're there. I'm saying, well, if I give you this button in this other spot where you'd rather be and you can find everything there, wouldn't you rather do that? And of course, what I'm going to do in that button is have an SQL query go and do the search bit for me.
Okay.
Because then what I end up with is I'll, have a data grid with what I expect to be maybe a dozen results, as opposed to having to having the decisions engine do this lengthy scan in memory.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I think that makes sense.
I'm also trying to get them to admit to me some of their ad hoc processes. They've been sort of reluctant to do that. I think there's this perception that, hey, this thing's so flexible, right? I mean, I kind of remember that was sort of a selling point. Is like, hey, look at how flexible this is. You got these column sorts and filters, and it's been like a first thing we want to show end users. And I cringe. And I think, but how expensive is that, right?
Sure.
Compared to what you just described, if I have user editable filters, that changes the content actually in a more meaningful way and pushes some of the processing load into another system that actually has the time and space to do it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there are resource costs to the report header and the column header filters for sure. So that's something to consider in terms of your overall review. Yeah. So, but that's not usually a thing we look at or end up hitting on as the main driver of issues. So it might be worth a cursory review with someone on the support team to see if we can help you identify some things.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, so next up we have Tyson here. All right, Tyson, you want to see an example of a user-controlled data-driven design? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, Will, if you were there for this training, but we were shown where like you had people that had created a form where it allowed users to essentially create their rules, and then it was updating the entity. Anything that you have to point me in the right direction to get started on that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with the employee onboarding app in the App
Okay.
Store.
Cool.
So let's go down. Let me just import this really quick.
And then I'm also going to bother you about the chart datum.
Yes, I got a half working example. I will get that to
Sweet.
you this afternoon.
Cool.
So where am I at here? Employee onboarding. Okay, so there, what Tyson is referring to here is we had an in-person training event this last week, and we had one of our architects describe what data-driven design is. And data-driven design is a style of building workflows that sort of considers maintenance work ahead of time and puts the management work into the user's hands. So instead of expecting your business users to get comfortable in the decisions flow and come in here one day and make changes, you're building using these entities and these folders and these things that drive the behavior of the flow. So here we're looking at employee onboarding, but this is arguably just generic tasking. And so in this flow, there are onboarding activities, and I'm going to add an onboarding activity here. This would be called a setup AD groups. And I can select a responsible group here. I'll say it's for administrators. I can set an activity order, and I can say there will be steps here. And then I can done, and I can add more of these. And so what I have you pay attention to is the activity order piece is how we create a sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or how we do parallel with multiple in one state. So I'm going to quickly do just step 2.1 here, activity order 2. I'm just going to put some garbage text in here, and this will be activity. Did I say 2.2 or 2.1? Activity 2.2, administrators, and this will also be 2, and just some garbage text here. So now, effective in decisions, what I just have are 3 entities. If I look at folder view, maybe they're not in this folder. I have 3 entities. These might be a database structure. What is the data type here really quickly? Onboarding activity is a simple data structure. That's fine.
Okay.
And so I have these activities. Now I'm the HR, operations team member who knows what the steps are, who's updating or modifying. So I'm managing this list of objects here, right? You as the designer of the workflow have built the entity, you've mapped the entity in the flow, which we'll show in just a minute, and you've created like the CRUD interface for me as a user to manage my stuff here. What happens is when I run this flow, if I go ahead and I go to run the main flow here, I'll just right click and run it. And then I'm just going to put in some data here just to kick this off. Will hire date's fine there you go. So you're my hiring manager. This is my email. Right, here's my phone number, whatever, start date, sure. I'm gonna run this. So this is a pretty normal flow. If I look at my flow, you'll see one of the things it's gonna do here is it's gonna set up a process folder. And then what it's gonna do is get all onboarding activities. And these are the simple data structure we were just looking at. And the 2 pieces to pay attention to here are for each in order and for each activity. So when this flow is launched, it looks at that folder and it says, give me all of these objects. And then it's going to order those objects by that value we put in. And then it's going to group for each them. And this is what we see here. So for each, this is how we get that sequential but parallel behavior based on the values. And you can see this is where the flow will spend all of its time at, inside of here. And if I look at this, I can see that what happens is I pass in a process folder ID and I pass in an onboarding activity. If I come in here and look at onboarding activity, you'll see what I'm doing is I'm mapping in, like if I come and look at the assignment setup, who's this getting mapped to? It's getting mapped to the accounts and groups comes from onboarding activity group assigned. That's that drop down list on that option. If I look at my assignment action name, it says create account. Complete tasks. Sorry, that's the action name. I should be looking at the assignment name up here. You can see assignment name is onboarding activity name for employee name. So the assignment name itself is coming from that object. We're taking that entity, and then we are in some way mapping it to an assignment. And this one just happens to allow for sequential as well as parallel behavior. If I look though, if I come in here and I look and I see I created an onboarding ticket, and I look in here, here's new hire Will Pedersen. This is all simple, straightforward stuff. This is a process folder. I can see the first step here, set up groups for, set up AD groups for Will Pedersen. I'll complete this task. You can see the steps I put are here. I can just put my notes in. Now, what I'm going to get are steps 2.1 and activity 2.2. And then I can complete these and I can continue the process. So the workflow itself is very simple. It's just that it knows, or when it's run, and then you'll see we actually complete that particular flow. But as for users to manage this, I don't edit the design of the flow. Like I don't come in here and I tweak the rules, right? Or I tweak the design of the flow. Because this thing fetches and then for each is in some intelligent way, after setting up, some sort of holding object, which is what the process folder and the, we don't even use extension data. That's interesting. Here does is it just allows me to manage this. So it's not just that I've built a process or a workflow for a department. I've built a workflow with a management user interface laid on top of that workflow. And now users to make changes don't have to learn how to use the tool and go to make these changes. One of the things the holy grail would be to build this flow and then hand it off to HR and say, any changes, I've created a development account for you in our dev server. Here's links to training. I don't know that any of our customers have cracked that code. And if you have, please let me know how you did it, because I think everybody on this call and every one of our customers would like to know how to do that. But we could, if this pattern won't solve every change request, right? They might have a different something that is a substantial change. But if it's just the management of the steps in the process, this kind of pattern works really well to empower the users of the tool to be able to manage their own processes independently of us, the teams that are actually constructing those. Does this make sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Could you hop back into the main flow? I don't know
Yeah,
if I've seen a for each in order before.
Yeah, sure. So it's just one of our variety of for eaches. So what you do here is you pass in the type, and then it reads in the properties.
Okay.
And then it's gonna allow you to order. Here's your collection and here's your type, right? And then it reads in the property, and it just allows you to order these things if there's some sort of integer that it can count. It should, let's see, where's it at? For each. Yeah. Okay. For each in group.
For each in group. Okay.
Oh, hold on. This is for each in group. This is not. Sorry. This is for each in group, not for each order. This is grabbing. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, this
No,
makes more sense. Apologies. So this is grabbing all of the ones and all of the twos and dealing with them as groups. Apologies.
Okay. No, that makes more sense. I was like, I don't think I've ever seen a for each in order, but a for each in group I have used before. So cool. No, that looks great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, Radley, you're up next, sir. What do you got for us?
Hey, Will. So first off, this was great learning about this. Will you guys be doing the that training on a periodic basis? I wasn't able to make it out there this past week.
Yep, quarterly. So currently we're targeting December for our next in-person training event.
Okay, excellent, very good. Also, just want to say thanks for following up with me on that report issue from yesterday. I've yet to look at that, but it is on my list.
You bet.
So for my question today, I'm starting a new workflow. In portions of the form are data that I don't want to store and make available once the form has been submitted. Like, okay, I'll use it as part of the workflow, but then I want that data to just be gone. Okay. From what I've seen in the process view, right, you get that view completed form option for
Okay.
states that are done, and
Okay.
that shows the entire form. Is there a way to hide a section of a form from that view completed form view?
Now it should show the form. So if there's visibilities on the rules or active form flows controlling visibility, then it's supposed to show the form that was completed by the user. So is the
Okay.
user actually completing a full form, but you only want to show some specific pieces of it later?
I want to show 90% of it later. There's 10%. There's information that I want them to put in that I'm then going to email out to different groups, but it's sensitive information.
Mhm.
So it's not going to be part of a data structure. I'm just going to use it as part of the emails, and then the data will be gone once the workflow is complete. But I don't want to keep it in that view completed form
You need
option.
the view completed form at all? So you can disable that, would be the easiest
Okay.
answer.
All right, let's see how we do that.
Yeah, like I'll just look at, if I come into my form single onboarding activity and I look at one of these assigned form steps, under assignment setup, if you scroll to the bottom and deselect save form result, you
Awesome.
cannot have the view, it won't save, it won't show the view completed form at all.
Okay. And is there a way, what would be the other option to just, if I want to have this save form result, if I don't want to have this one section, what would be the other?
I don't think you can control it.
Okay.
We have, it's the form that was completed by the user.
What if it was kind of a multi-form process, you know, go to a next form and then complete this, and then don't show that form? Would that be something that would work?
Okay, so it's the assigned form. So like let's assume I have two forms and I'm like completing my first form with all the information, and then you're going to show the next form, which is like, please confirm this information is correct, but it would then not show the sensitive information you want.
I was thinking it would be the sensitive, like I'd have a generic non-sensitive information, then they go to the next form, which is all the sensitive stuff.
That's a great suggestion. That would totally work, right?
Would that work? Okay.
You either don't make that an assigned form at all, which means it won't show up, or you make it an assigned form and deselect view completed result.
Check that. Okay.
The downside of not making an assigned form is if they have to complete it. If something goes wrong, they would have to redo the assignment potentially. I don't know if that's a deal breaker, but you could go from in session to assigned or assigned to in session, and an in session the data only exists if you persist it somewhere. There'd be no way to see that.
Okay, very good. That's what I needed. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
Right.
Okay, and we've got anonymous attendee. What's the best practice to set up containerized instances behind a load balancer in the production environment? Does a new container need to connect to the same DB? Or how would data sync between containers? Okay, this is probably requires a conversation, so I'd love if you are willing to just use raise hand, I can unmute you because this one comes in as anonymous. Containers in containers operate exactly like virtual machines conceptually for us. Like a container is a virtual machine. A cluster in decisions is two or more decision servers or two or more decisions containers working against one database. Let me come here and look at containers, and we can pull up this diagram. So this is a diagram that helps you see how this works. So I have two containers here, possibly a process mining container as well. And those things share a database, they share file storage, and they share, this is something new to version 8, they share a Redis cache server, which is a new dependency we've added in V8 to enhance the cross communication inside of a cluster, both for regular virtual machines as well as containers. So in decisions, a cluster means multiple servers connected to one database. The setup would be a database, file storage, and then Redis server. And that means that these decision servers can, in our world, all of the data of like the configuration entities or the designer entities is stored in the database. So when a server comes online, that's pointed at a database, like you add a new node in a cluster, that thing comes online, and then it reads out all of the flows and the forms and everything out of the database, and so it unpacks all of its contents for you from the database. Which means you don't have to like set up the new node, or if you deploy a new container, what we're talking about here, it inherits all of the configuration from the database automatically. It loads in all of your code files, it does your code compilation, loads in all the flows and the forms and all those things into memory. And so it comes online automatically as long as it shares the same database as the others. And then once that node comes online, those two or more nodes are sending events. They're doing like pub sub to the Redis server, so that sort of object change events, because there's a lot of caching that occurs in decisions, get sent to all the other nodes in the cluster. In older versions, we used to have all the nodes make HTTP calls to each other directly. That was not necessarily the most foolproof method to ensure cluster communication. So we've incorporated a Redis server to make that cluster communication much more robust. Realistically, if you look at any of the cluster docs that we have, the deployment is different, and then some of the setup is different in terms of how you deploy containers or how you use environment files to override settings.xml properties that have historically been at the node level. So that you can deploy a container with a preset set of configurations. But the way I think about our containers is I doubt the product team enjoys this, but I call them fat containers, as they are basically miniaturized virtual machines that they've done a lot of work to be able to run inside of a container. And then, you can, of course, grow and shrink based on some configurable volume, which is something that our application doesn't manage directly, right? We get managed by some flavor of Kubernetes or some other sort of container management software. Any other questions about containers? You've asked this question as an anonymous attendee, so I can't. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, other mute. So quick question here which catches my eye. Is having a Redis service a requirement for Decisions version 8, or is it optional when we have like a multi-node system?
It is a requirement for V8 clusters.
Okay.
It's a new dependency added for version 8.
Okay, I will definitely go raising that up the flagpole. I don't see that as a demerit. I'm actually rather hopeful that's going to express itself as some improvements for our situation. So thanks.
Yeah, you bet, sir. Happy to help. Hey, any other questions from the crowd today? Doing better than I did yesterday. I hope we didn't even post that video from yesterday. I was 0 in a million in questions asked and answered yesterday. I'm sure we did, but
I might have.
all right. Anybody else got any questions today? We're halfway through.
Name session question.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead, Chris. What you got?
Yeah, I was just trying to find this little bit that has got me a little bit puzzled. It's sort of like I think there was an effort to explain it, but I'm just a little bit thick on what that means. For a named session, there is some advice that when I'm using a named session to call a flow via post, that I may want to include a clear session extension remark in my URL, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Now, the clear session piece, it seems to indicate it's optional. You may want to, and if you don't, there might be trouble with another user / session using the flow.
Right.
And what I am stumped on is what is the red line that says, hey, at this point, you need to use that or you're going to have trouble.
It's this, like, we can use name sessions to expose like unauthenticated, like say forms. So maybe, maybe you have like a comment box workflow, right? And you want it to be anonymous for some whatever, right? You just want your employees to be able to just dump like comments about the company into this without knowing who they are. Well, if your users are also in decisions, what can happen is the browser doesn't know which cookie to use. And so let's assume you're working, or you log in for the day and you're like, man, I really wish we could do this differently. You go hit that work, you go to your intranet site, you click that workflow, boom, you're entering your comment in, right? And so then you click submit. Then you try to go back to your decisions instance. It's attempting to log you in as the named session now. And it gets all screwed up because now you've accessed one server with two different contexts. And it's going to try to use it. Oftentimes, if not always, will try to like use the first one or the named session. So it's when you can hit the same server through sort of like authenticated and unauthenticated type patterns. So if you've created like some sort of site for your external users to hit and do like submit things into your company through, or vendors or something, and they never contact it any other way, it's probably not a problem. But if some people use it and some people also log in, that's where that clear session parameter has its utility. Like we have like I think it's like a college, they hit this, and they would use, I framed in like a decisions page on like one of their intranet sites using a named session because it was just a generic sort of portal view. And then when users would try to log in, they were getting logged in as the named session because their browser had picked up that named session and was, creating caching authentication on the browser for it. Does that make sense?
That's actually kind of helpful, yes. The follow-up to that would be, though, suppose that the target flow is not interactive at all. Do we still have the same hazard?
No, like you're just calling it as an API.
Exactly.
And then I don't think there would be no cookie at all. So no, it's only UI stuff is when this becomes an issue, because that's when it's saving a cookie to the clients, to the client to reuse. So
if I would say that differently, showing a form prompts, save a cookie.
Yeah, like the actual if you look at the construction of an API versus like a UI interaction endpoint, you should see action equals API or action equals UI form, one of those, something like that, and that's what denotes on authentication what to do. So yeah, clear session would only be meaningful for UI form, not for API calls. You probably wouldn't. I don't think it would do anything in that example if you're just making an API call in.
All right. I think that tells me what I need to know. In as much as I started using this named session because remember, a while back I asked about how to get a session for a user. And then I discovered that when a job is run on the schedule, the current user is called system and has no session. And that's where I found myself trying to sort out, well, okay, if that's what's going on here, so I have to use a named session. Now the named session warns I may need to clear the session. It's kind of like I had a tough time parsing, does that apply to this use case? And The answer I'm getting here is no, it really does not, because I'm actually doing an
Doesn't sound like
API
it.
call.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it at all. It's just when you can hit the same decision site using user interface in a normal as well as a named session user context to avoid the named session user context being sticky on the client. Use clear session to enforce that that doesn't happen. Hopefully that makes that more clear for you.
What was that last sentence? Use what?
The clear session parameter,
Right.
like on the URL, that will enforce that a user session with user interface element that a call to decisions that renders UI that is made over a named session drops drops the authentication cache from the client. Authentication cache isn't a real phrase, but I think you know what I'm trying to say there.
You're getting back to the cookie again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. I'm glad I was here to answer that one. That's a tough one. The reason I know is because I remember when we added that. So
Yeah, I have a support ticket open. They're struggling with it.
well, go ahead and close that one for me if you don't mind.
I will.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. Right. Anything else? Anything else that we got? Anybody? Okay. Going once, going twice.
Oh,
All righty. All right. Thanks, everybody. Who is in tomorrow, Caitlin?
tomorrow it is. Brandon.
Brandon? Okay, wonderful. So Brandon is here tomorrow. Okay. Oh, did I make weird? Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a good one. Thanks.